He was a self-made millionaire with a perfect life and a pregnant wife waiting at home. But Richard Hallberg risked it all for a secret getaway to Bora Bora with his stunning mistress, Clara. He thought he had the perfect cover story: a boring business conference in Tokyo. He believed his wife, Samantha, was too naive, too in love to ever suspect. He was wrong. While he was sipping champagne in paradise, Samantha wasn't just crying. She was plotting. And what she did next didn't just shock him, it systematically destroyed his entire world. The scent of money was the first thing you noticed in Richard Hallberg's world. It wasn't the crass, loud smell of new cash, but the subtle, aged aroma of old wealth, a fragrance woven into the very fabric of their palatial home in the Hollywood Hills. It clung to the plush, cream-colored carpets, the original Rothkos hanging on the walls, and the floor-to-ceiling glass windows that offered a panoramic view of a Los Angeles that seemed to bow at their feet. For Samantha Hallberg, who was 7 months pregnant, this scent had started to feel less like a perfume and more like a beautifully crafted anesthetic, numbing her to the gilded cage she had willingly walked into. She stood before the vast expanse of glass, one hand resting protectively on the perfect swell of her belly, watching the city lights begin to twinkle like a fallen constellation. Richard was behind her, his voice a low, persuasive hum as he spoke on the phone. He was always on the phone. No, Peter. The deal has to close by Friday. I don't care what you have to do. I'll be incommunicado for a week. A complete digital detox," he said, a small, self-satisfied smile playing on his lips. Samantha didn't turn around. She knew that smile. It was the one he wore when he was orchestrating a particularly ruthless corporate takeover, or when he was lying. Lately, the two had become indistinguishable. "A digital detox," she murmured to the reflection of her tired face in the window. The woman staring back at her looked like a stranger. Her once vibrant eyes, the color of warm honey, were now clouded with a perpetual sadness. Her blonde hair, usually styled to perfection, was pulled back in a simple, unadorned ponytail. Pregnancy had softened her features, but anxiety had sharpened them, creating a portrait of weary beauty. Richard ended his call with a decisive snap of his designer phone case. He crossed the room in 3 long, confident strides, his expensive Italian leather shoes making no sound on the thick rug. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. He was a handsome man, with sharp, intelligent features, piercing blue eyes, and a charisma that could charm the most hardened cynic. It was this charisma that had captured her heart, made her believe in his promises of a shared future, a partnership. "Thinking about baby names again?" he asked, his voice now gentle, the ruthless CEO replaced by the doting husband. It was a seamless transition, one he performed with practiced ease. "I was thinking about your digital detox," she replied, her voice flat. "It's sudden, this conference in Tokyo. It's a huge opportunity, darling," he said, kissing her temple. "The keynote speaker. Think of the prestige. It's for us. For our family. For us." The words echoed in the hollow space that had grown between them. Everything Richard did was supposedly for them. The 16-hour work days, the last-minute business trips, the constant draining social events where she had to play the role of the perfect, adoring wife. It was all for the magnificent future he was building. But Samantha was beginning to realize that in this grand architectural plan, she was not the partner, but merely a beautiful, decorative fixture. "I just wish you didn't have to go," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Not now. The baby." "Shh," he soothed, turning her around to face him. He tilted her chin up, forcing her to meet his gaze. "It's just a week. My flight is in 3 hours. I've arranged for your sister to stay with you. You won't be alone for a minute, and I'll call you the second I land." His eyes were sincere, his touch tender. For a fleeting moment, she allowed herself to believe him. She leaned into his embrace, the familiar scent of his expensive cologne a comforting poison. But then her eyes fell on his travel bag, already packed and waiting by the door. It was a sleek, black leather duffel, a brand she didn't recognize, and next to it, a smaller, more feminine carry-on, in a shade of blush pink. A cold dread washed over her. "Is someone traveling with you?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Richard's expression didn't flicker. "Just my new assistant, Clara. She's handling the logistics. A real lifesaver. You'd like her? Clara." The name hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Samantha had seen her once, a stunningly beautiful woman with raven hair and a predatory grace, during a brief visit to Richard's office. She had introduced herself as a consultant. Samantha had felt a pang of jealousy then, a feeling she had quickly dismissed as hormonal paranoia. Now, that paranoia returned with a vengeance. "I see," was all she could manage. Richard, sensing her withdrawal, tightened his grip. "Samantha, don't do this. Don't let your imagination run away with you. This is a business trip. Nothing more. I love you. You and our baby are my entire world." He kissed her then, a deep, passionate kiss that was meant to reassure, to silence her doubts. But all Samantha could taste was the lie. 3 hours later, she stood at the same window, watching the black town car that carried her husband disappear down the winding driveway. Her sister, Erin, was bustling around in the kitchen, her cheerful chatter about baby-proofing the mansion a stark contrast to the storm raging inside Samantha. She felt a kick, a sharp, insistent reminder of the life growing within her. Her son. A son who would be born into this gilded cage. A son who would have a father who was a master of deception. A sudden, fierce resolve ignited within her. It was a feeling she hadn't experienced in years, a spark of the determined, independent woman she had been before Richard had swept her off her feet and into his carefully constructed world. She would not let her son grow up in a house built on lies. With a newfound purpose, she walked over to Richard's home office, a room she rarely entered. It was his sanctuary, a testament to his power and success. The large mahogany desk was neat, almost sterile. But Samantha knew Richard. He was a man of contingencies, of hidden compartments and secret codes. Her eyes scanned the room, searching for something out of place. And then she saw it. Tucked away on a bookshelf, behind a row of leather-bound first editions, was a small, unassuming black notebook. It was the kind of thing most people would overlook. But Samantha had seen him write in it once, late at night, when he thought she was asleep. Her heart pounding, she took the notebook down. It wasn't locked. With trembling hands, she opened it. The pages were filled with Richard's neat, precise handwriting. It wasn't business notes or stock market figures. It was a log, a detailed, meticulous log of his affair with Clara. Dates, locations, expensive gifts, and at the end, a detailed itinerary for their business trip to Tokyo. Except they weren't going to Tokyo. They were going to Bora Bora. The notebook fell from her numb fingers. The city lights outside blurred into a meaningless smear of color. The gilded cage had shattered, and Samantha was finally, terrifyingly, free. The world tilted on its axis. For a long moment, Samantha couldn't breathe. The air in the opulent office, usually kept at a precise, cool temperature, felt thick and suffocating. The notebook lay on the floor, its pages splayed open like a fallen bird, the neat, damning script a testament to a life she never knew she was living. Bora Bora. The name itself was a mockery, a paradise destination for a love that was a complete fabrication. Her knees gave way, and she sank onto the plush carpet, a silent scream trapped in her throat. The pain was a physical entity, a shard of ice piercing her heart and spreading its tendrils through her veins. Every memory, every shared laugh, every tender touch was now tainted, replaying in her mind as a scene from a well-rehearsed play. She was the unwitting audience, the fool who had given a standing ovation to a performance of deceit. Tears finally came. hot and furious, blurring the city lights into a chaotic swirl of neon. She wept for the woman she had been, the hopeful, trusting girl who had fallen in love with a charismatic illusion. She wept for the baby inside her, an innocent soul tethered to a legacy of lies. The weight of the betrayal was crushing, a physical pressure on her chest that made it hard to draw a full breath. "Samantha, what's wrong? I heard a thud." Erin's voice cut through the fog of her grief. Her sister stood in the doorway, her cheerful expression dissolving into one of deep concern as she took in the scene. Samantha on the floor, the scattered notebook, the raw despair on her face. "Oh, honey," Erin whispered, rushing to her side and gathering her into a fierce embrace. She didn't ask questions, not at first. She just held her, her solid, comforting presence a lifeline in the swirling vortex of Samantha's emotions. Erin, with her practical nature and no-nonsense attitude, had always been Samantha's anchor. She had been wary of Richard from the start, her skepticism a quiet hum beneath the loud chorus of his charm. He's... Samantha couldn't form the words. She could only point a trembling finger at the notebook. Erin picked it up. Her eyes, a shade of green so different from Samantha's honey brown, scanned the pages, her expression hardening with each line. The silence in the room was broken only by Samantha's ragged sobs. When Erin finally looked up, her face was a mask of cold fury. "That son of a bitch," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "He's not in Tokyo." "Bora Bora," Samantha choked out. "With her, Clara." "I'm going to kill him," Erin declared, her hands clenching into fists. "I'm going to fly to Bora Bora, and I'm going to—" "No," Samantha said, her voice surprisingly firm. The fire in Erin's eyes had ignited something in her. The initial shock was beginning to recede, replaced by a cold, clear anger. Crying wouldn't change anything. Falling apart was what he would expect. It was what he counted on. The docile, dependent wife, too broken to fight back. She pushed herself up, using Erin's arm for support. She wiped her tears with the back of her hand, her gaze falling on her reflection in the darkened window. The woman staring back was no longer just a sad, betrayed wife. There was a new light in her eyes, a flicker of steel. It was the awakening of a woman who had been dormant for too long. "Killing him is too easy," Samantha said, her voice steady. "He built this empire on lies. He built us on a lie. I'm not going to let him get away with it. I'm not going to be the victim in his story." Erin looked at her, a slow smile spreading across her face. "Now you're talking. What's the plan?" The plan. A week ago, her plan for the day wouldn't have extended beyond choosing a paint color for the nursery. Now she had to orchestrate the dismantling of a millionaire's life, her husband's life. "First," Samantha began, her mind racing, "I need to understand everything. His finances, his company. Not the glossy version he presents to the world, but the real picture. The skeletons, the vulnerabilities. Richard was meticulous, a master of control. But he was also arrogant. He believed he was untouchable, that his pregnant wife was safely tucked away in their gilded cage, too naive and too in love to ever question him. That arrogance was his weakness. He has a lawyer, Michael Chen, Samantha thought aloud, and a CFO, Peter Vance. They're loyal to him. They'll stonewall me. So we go around them, Erin said, her mind already working, a strategist in her own right. Exactly. Samantha walked over to the mahogany desk, her movements now filled with purpose. She ran her hand over the smooth, polished surface. This desk was the epicenter of his power, and for the next week, it was hers. She sat down in his large leather chair. It felt empowering. She opened his laptop. It was password protected, of course, but she knew him. She knew the patterns of his mind. He used dates that were significant to him, to his achievements. She tried the date of his first major acquisition. Denied. The date he made his first million. Denied. She paused, thinking. What was the one thing he was proudest of? The one thing that truly defined his sense of self? It wasn't her. It wasn't their marriage. It was the day he founded his company, Halberg Industries. She typed in the date, the 08/15/2015. The screen flickered, and the desktop appeared. A wave of triumph washed over her. She was in. For the next few hours, with Erin feeding her coffee and snacks, Samantha delved into the digital labyrinth of Richard's life. She found files within files, encrypted folders, and offshore accounts she never knew existed. The scale of his wealth and his deception was staggering. He hadn't just lied about his affair. He had built a complex financial fortress designed to protect his assets from everyone, including her. The prenuptial agreement she had signed without a second thought now seemed like a declaration of war. But hidden within a folder labeled Contingencies, she found what she was looking for. It was a list of contacts, not just business associates, but people who operated in the gray areas of the corporate world. Hackers, private investigators, and one name that stood out, Laura Vance. Samantha's breath caught. Laura Vance, Peter Vance's ex-wife. The notes next to her name were brief and cryptic. Forensic accountant, knows where the bodies are buried, bitter. A slow, predatory smile touched Samantha's lips. It was a smile that mirrored the one she had seen on Richard's face so many times. It was the smile of someone who had just found their opponent's queen unprotected. She picked up the phone, her hand steady. She ignored the expensive multi-line office phone on the desk and used her own personal cell. She looked at Erin, her eyes blazing with a newfound fire. "It's time to make a call," she said. She dialed the number. It rang twice before a crisp, professional voice answered. "Laura Vance." "Ms. Vance," Samantha said, her voice calm and clear, betraying none of the turmoil that had racked her just hours before. "My name is Samantha Halberg. I'm Richard Halberg's wife. I believe you and I have a mutual interest in discussing my husband's creative accounting. I have access to his private server, and a week before he gets back from Bora Bora. I'm prepared to make you a very generous offer for your time." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and then a low, appreciative chuckle. "Mrs. Halberg," Laura Vance replied, a hint of amusement in her voice. "You have my undivided attention." The meeting was set for the following morning at a discreet coffee shop in Larchmont Village, a place far removed from the glitzy, high-powered lunch spots Richard frequented. Samantha chose it specifically for its anonymity. She arrived 10 minutes early, her pregnancy a convenient disguise. People tended to look away from heavily pregnant women, their gazes softening with a kind of gentle pity, assuming a vulnerability that, for Samantha, had become a shield. She had dressed carefully, not in the designer labels Richard preferred, but in a simple, elegant maternity dress that spoke of quiet confidence, not inherited wealth. She had spent the night not sleeping, but studying. With Erin by her side, she had navigated the labyrinth of Richard's files, downloading everything that seemed important onto a heavily encrypted hard drive. The scale of his financial duplicity was breathtaking. It wasn't just about hiding money. It was about creating an entirely separate financial identity, a shadow empire built on shell corporations and offshore accounts. Laura Vance arrived exactly on time. She was a woman in her late 40s, with sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to miss nothing. She was impeccably dressed in a tailored pantsuit, her salt and pepper hair cut in a chic, no-nonsense bob. She exuded an aura of competence and contained fury. She was, Samantha realized, a woman who had been underestimated before and had made those who did so regret it profoundly. "Mrs. Halberg," Laura said, her voice as crisp as her suit, as she slid into the booth opposite Samantha. She didn't offer a handshake. "Ms. Vance, thank you for meeting me," Samantha replied, her own voice steady. A waitress appeared, but Laura waved her away. "I'm not here for coffee. You said you had something for me." Samantha slid the encrypted hard drive across the table. "This is a complete mirror of my husband's private server. I believe you'll find the files under Project Nightingale particularly interesting. It seems to be his name for the financial infrastructure he set up to, shall we say, minimize his marital assets. Laura's eyebrows shot up. She pulled a small, sleek tablet from her briefcase, connected the drive, and within seconds, her fingers were flying across the screen. For several minutes, the only sound was the clatter of the coffee shop and the soft tapping of Laura's fingers. Samantha waited, her heart pounding a steady rhythm against her ribs. Finally, Laura looked up, a slow, dangerous smile spreading across her face. It was the smile of a predator who had just been handed the keys to the zoo. "Project Nightingale," she mused. How poetic. The man always did have a flair for the dramatic. This is comprehensive. I was hoping you'd think so, Samantha said. Peter, my ex-husband, he was the architect of all this, Laura said, her eyes scanning the files with a mixture of professional admiration and personal disgust. I always knew he was brilliant, but I never thought he'd be this reckless. This is financial artistry, and it's monumentally illegal. I need to know everything, Samantha said, leaning forward. Every shell corporation, every hidden account, every asset he thinks is untouchable. I don't just want a divorce, Ms. Vance. I want to dismantle his empire. I want to take back what he stole from me and what he plans to steal from our son. Laura studied her for a long moment, her sharp gaze assessing, calculating. This isn't just about the money for you, is it? No, Samantha admitted, her voice dropping to a whisper. It's about justice. He built a life on the assumption that I was a fool. He needs to learn that I'm not. Good, Laura said with a decisive nod. Because a purely emotional client is a liability. A vengeful one, however, can be a great asset. This goes beyond a simple divorce settlement. We're talking about wire fraud, tax evasion, money laundering. If we play this right, Richard won't just lose his money. He could lose his freedom. The words hung in the air, heavy with consequence. The thought of Richard in prison sent a shiver down Samantha's spine, a mixture of fear and a dark, satisfying thrill. What do you need from me? Samantha asked. Access, Laura replied. Continued access to his network, if you can maintain it, and complete trust. I'm going to bring in a legal team, the best white-collar crime specialists in the country. They're sharks, Samantha. Once they smell blood, they don't let go. But they're expensive. Very expensive. I have some funds of my own, Samantha began, thinking of the trust fund her parents had left her, a sum that now seemed pitifully small compared to Richard's vast fortune. Laura held up a hand. Don't worry about that. We'll make Richard pay for his own destruction. There's a provision in many prenuptial agreements, even ironclad ones like yours, for discovery and legal fees if one party can be proven to have engaged in fraudulent concealment of assets. And oh, he has, beautifully so. She pointed to a file on her tablet. Look here. A Cayman Islands Corporation, Seraphim Holdings. It holds the deed to a penthouse in New York, a villa in Lake Como, and a collection of vintage cars, all purchased in the last 2 years. All, I assume, conveniently left off his financial disclosures to you. Samantha felt a wave of nausea. The villa in Lake Como. He had told her it belonged to a client. He had even shown her pictures, lamenting that they were too busy to take a vacation there. He's a sociopath, Aaron's voice said from beside her. Samantha jumped. She hadn't even realized her sister had slipped into the booth next to her. Aaron gave Laura a nod. She has my full support, and my savings, for what it's worth. What's the first move? Laura's smile widened. The first move is to let him enjoy his vacation. We need him blissfully unaware in Bora Bora, sipping cocktails with his mistress. We need him to get comfortable, to believe he's gotten away with it. While he's sunning himself, we're going to be preparing a storm he can't even imagine. She turned to Samantha. Go home. Act normal. If he calls, be the loving, slightly needy wife he expects. Complain about your swollen ankles. Ask him if he's eating properly. Do not, under any circumstances, let him suspect that anything has changed. Your greatest weapon right now is his arrogance. The advice was sound. but the thought of speaking to him, of feigning affection, made her stomach churn. "I can do it," Samantha said, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. "I know you can," Laura said. "Now, I'm going to take this hard drive and disappear for 48 hours. I'll be in touch with a list of preliminary injunctions we need to file. We're going to freeze his assets, all of them. By the time he steps off that private jet, he's going to find out that his gilded world has been put on ice." As Laura packed up her things and left, Samantha felt a profound shift in her reality. The grief was still there, a dull ache beneath the surface, but it was now overlaid with a sense of purpose, a cold, clear determination. She was no longer just a victim of Richard's betrayal. She was the architect of his ruin. That evening, as she sat in the sterile perfection of her living room, her phone rang. The caller ID flashed. Richard. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She took a deep breath, looked at Aaron, who gave her a reassuring nod, and answered. "Richard," she said, pitching her voice to sound sleepy and soft. "Hey, darling." His voice was warm, intimate, the sound of the ocean faintly audible in the background. "Did I wake you? I'm so sorry about the time difference." "It's okay," she murmured. "I was just resting. My ankles are the size of grapefruits." "My poor girl," he cooed, the sympathy dripping with insincerity. "Just a few more days. I miss you like crazy. This conference is a real bore without you." Samantha closed her eyes, picturing him on a white sand beach, Clara draped over him. The image fueled her resolve. "I miss you too," she lied. "Tell me everything. Is Tokyo amazing?" And as Richard launched into a detailed, fictitious account of his keynote speech and the boring business dinners, Samantha listened, playing her part to perfection. She was the loving wife, the naive fool. And with every word he spoke, he was unknowingly tightening the noose. That she, with the help of Laura Vance, was carefully, meticulously placing around his neck. The next 4 days were a masterclass in deception. Samantha lived a dual life. To the outside world and to Richard, she was the expectant mother, nesting and waiting for her husband's return. She attended her prenatal yoga class, had lunch with friends, and fielded Richard's nightly calls from Tokyo, each conversation a carefully choreographed performance of wifely devotion. She would listen to his fabricated stories of boardrooms and networking events, all while picturing him on a sun-drenched beach, the sound of the waves a mocking soundtrack to his lies. "The deal went through, darling," he'd said on the third night, his voice filled with false modesty. "The Japanese investors were blown away. This is a game-changer for us." "That's wonderful, Richard," Samantha had replied, her voice a perfect blend of pride and affection. "I'm so proud of you." Meanwhile, in the secret inner sanctum of Richard's home office, a war room was taking shape. Laura Vance, true to her word, had assembled a formidable team. There was Jonathan Marks, a silver-haired, shark-like lawyer whose specialty was eviscerating corporate titans on the witness stand, and a young, tech-savvy paralegal named Sophie, who could navigate the dark corners of the internet with terrifying efficiency. They worked with a quiet, focused intensity, fueled by coffee and a shared sense of righteous purpose. The mahogany desk was now covered in laptops, legal documents, and complex diagrams mapping out Richard's financial empire. Laura was the general, directing her troops with precision. "He's using a series of interlocking LLCs to obscure ownership of the real estate," Laura explained, pointing to a flowchart on a large monitor. "It's a classic Russian nesting doll structure, but he made a mistake. He used the same law firm in the Bahamas to register 3 of the key holding companies. That's our entry point." Samantha found herself surprisingly adept in this new world. Her art history degree, which Richard had often patronizingly dismissed as a cute hobby, had trained her to see patterns, to understand provenance, and to trace the history of an object, or in this case, a transaction. She was able to connect dots that even Laura's team had missed, linking a shell corporation to the purchase of a specific piece of art, a multi-million-dollar Basquiat that Richard had claimed was a long-term lease. "It's not leased," Samantha had said, pointing to the documents she'd unearthed from a folder labeled Household Insurance. He bought it outright at a private auction in Geneva. He used a proxy bidder, but the insurance policy is in the name of Oakhaven Enterprises, which is another one of his shell companies. Jonathan Marks had looked at her with newfound respect. "Mrs. Halberg, you have a gift for this. My husband provided an excellent education in the art of deception," she had replied dryly. Her greatest contribution, however, was the Trojan horse. On the fourth day, Sophie, the paralegal, hit a wall. "I can't get past this final firewall," she said, frustrated. "It protects his personal trading account, the one he uses for his most sensitive stock manipulations. It's a proprietary encryption, something I've never seen before. This was the heart of the operation, the account that held the bulk of Richard's liquid wealth, the money he could move quickly and easily. Without access to it, their asset freezing strategy would be incomplete." Samantha looked at the screen, at the lines of code that represented a digital fortress. She thought about Richard, about his arrogance, his belief in his own intellectual superiority. His password for the laptop had been an act of hubris. This would be too. It wouldn't be a random string of characters. It would be something personal, something that fed his ego. "What does he love more than money?" she asked the room. "Himself," Erin muttered from the corner, where she was acting as a combination of bodyguard and caterer. Samantha shook her head. "No, he loves the idea of a dynasty, a legacy." Her eyes widened. "The baby." She walked over to the keyboard. "He's been obsessed with one name for our son, a name from his family, a name he thinks sounds powerful." She typed in the name Theodore. "Nothing. Add his own name," Laura suggested. "He's an egomaniac." Samantha typed Theodore Richard Halberg. "Nothing." She sighed, frustrated. Then an idea sparked. It was a long shot, a detail so small and intimate she had almost forgotten it. During one of their early, happier dates, they had talked about their dreams. Richard had confessed, in a rare moment of vulnerability, that his ultimate goal wasn't just to be rich, but to be a kingmaker, a man who pulled the strings of the world. He had a favorite quote from a Roman emperor. With trembling fingers, she typed it in. It was a phrase he had once whispered to her, telling her it was the secret to his success. "Invictus maneo, I remain unconquered." The screen flashed. Access granted. The room erupted in a collective gasp. Sophie stared at the screen, her mouth agape. "My God," she whispered, "we're in." What they found was more damning than they could have imagined. It wasn't just hidden wealth, it was evidence of insider trading, market manipulation, and a conspiracy to bankrupt a smaller, rival tech company. Richard wasn't just a cheat, he was a criminal. "This is it," Jonathan Marks said, his voice grim. "This is the kill shot. We have enough here to not only freeze every penny he has, but to trigger a full-blown SEC investigation. He's finished." Samantha felt a cold wave of finality wash over her. This was the point of no return. That night, when Richard called, his voice was lighter, happier than it had been all week. "Last night in Tokyo, my love," he said. "I can't wait to get home to you. I've bought you the most incredible gift." "I can't wait to see it," Samantha said, her voice a perfect imitation of excitement. She knew what the gift was. Laura's team had found the receipt, a 15-carat canary diamond necklace, purchased from a boutique jeweler in Bora Bora. It was a gift for his mistress, one he would likely claim to have bought for his wife. "I love you, Samantha," he said, his voice dropping to an intimate whisper. "I love you too," she replied, and for the first time the lie didn't taste like ash. It tasted like victory. After she hung up, she turned to her team. "He's coming home tomorrow. Is everything ready?" Jonathan Marks nodded, a grim smile on his face. "The injunctions will be filed the moment the banks open in New York. The SEC will receive an anonymous tip with the contents of this hard drive an hour later. By the time his plane touches down in Los Angeles, his credit cards will be declined, His bank accounts will be frozen, and his company's stock will be in freefall. Samantha took a deep breath. The storm was ready to break. She, the quiet, unassuming wife, had built the perfect Trojan horse, and Richard was flying at home himself, completely oblivious to the army hidden inside. The day of Richard's return was unnaturally bright, the Los Angeles sun casting sharp, unforgiving shadows across the manicured lawns of their estate. Samantha felt a strange sense of calm, the eye of the hurricane she had so meticulously created. Aaron was a nervous wreck, pacing the length of the vast living room, while Samantha sat serenely in an armchair, one hand resting on her belly, feeling the gentle, rhythmic kicks of her son. "I can't believe you're so calm," Aaron said for the 10th time. "He's going to walk through that door any minute. What if he gets violent? What if he tries to sweet-talk you?" "He will," Samantha said, her voice even. "That's his primary weapon. But it won't work. Not anymore. I'm not the same person I was a week ago." It was true. The woman who had wept on the office floor was gone. In her place was a woman who had stared into the abyss of her husband's deceit and had found not fear, but strength. She had discovered a resilience she never knew she possessed, a mind for strategy that had been lying dormant beneath years of marital complacency. At precisely 3:15 p.m., the purr of an expensive engine announced his arrival. Samantha watched from the window as the black town car pulled up the driveway. The driver opened the rear door, and Richard emerged, looking tanned, rested, and infuriatingly handsome in a crisp linen shirt and designer sunglasses. He exuded the casual confidence of a man who owned the world. A moment later, a second figure emerged from the car. Clara. She was even more beautiful in person, with a model's figure and an air of sultry entitlement. She laughed at something Richard said, placing a familiar hand on his arm. The gesture was so casual, so proprietary, it sent a fresh wave of anger through Samantha. "The nerve!" Aaron hissed, standing beside her at the window. "He brought her here? To your home?" "He's arrogant," Samantha said, her voice cold. "He believes he's untouchable. He thinks I'm a fool. He's about to learn how wrong he is." They watched as Richard handed Clara her blush-pink carry-on, gave her a discreet but lingering kiss on the cheek, and sent her on her way in the same car. Then he turned towards the house, his face transforming, the smug lover replaced by the eager, returning husband. Samantha moved away from the window and took her position in the center of the living room. Aaron stood a few feet behind her, a silent, supportive sentinel. The front door opened. "Darling, I'm home!" Richard's voice boomed through the marble foyer. He strode into the living room, his arms open wide, a dazzling smile on his face. "There's my beautiful wife. God, I've missed you." He moved to embrace her, but Samantha held up a hand, stopping him in his tracks. The smile on his face faltered, replaced by a flicker of confusion. "Richard," she said, her voice clear and steady. "We need to talk." "Of course, darling," he said, his smile returning, though slightly strained. "But can it wait? I've been on a plane for 15 hours and Did you have a nice time in Bora Bora?" The question dropped into the silent room like a stone. The color drained from Richard's face, his carefully constructed composure shattered, leaving behind a mask of pure shock. What are you talking about?" he stammered, his eyes darting around the room as if looking for an escape route. "I was in Tokyo, at a conference." "Don't lie to me, Richard," Samantha said, her voice dangerously quiet. "Not anymore. I know everything. I know about Clara. I know about the overwater bungalow at the St. Regis. I know about the 15-carat canary diamond necklace you bought her." She took a step closer, holding his gaze. "And I know about Project Nightingale. I know about Seraphim Holdings, the penthouse in New York, the villa in Lake Como. I know about the insider trading, the market manipulation, the conspiracy to defraud your rivals." Richard stared at her, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. He looked from Samantha's cold, resolute face to Aaron's furious one. The hunter had just realized he was the one in the trap, How? He whispered, the single word encompassing a universe of disbelief. You underestimated me, Samantha said simply. You thought I was just a pretty accessory to your perfect life. You were wrong. His shock was rapidly turning to anger. You went through my things? My computer? He snarled, his voice a low growl. You have no idea what you've done. Oh, I think I do, Samantha replied calmly. I've simply leveled the playing field. Just then, Richard's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his expression turning from anger to panic. It buzzed again, and again, a relentless cascade of notifications. What's happening? He demanded, his eyes wide with fear as he scrolled through the messages. My accounts. They're frozen. My credit cards are being declined. The stock. It's plummeting. What did you do? I did what you taught me to do, Richard, Samantha said. I protected my assets. Our son's assets. He looked at her. Truly looked at her. For the first time in years. He wasn't seeing the docile, adoring wife. He was seeing a stranger, a formidable opponent who had outmaneuvered him at every turn. You, he breathed, a mixture of awe and hatred in his voice. This was you. With a little help, Samantha said, gesturing vaguely towards the office. Desperation clawed at him. He tried to revert to his most trusted tactic, manipulation. He softened his expression, his eyes welling with crocodile tears. Samantha, baby, please, he begged, taking a step towards her. We can fix this. Whatever you think you know, it's a misunderstanding. I love you. It's always been you. Clara. She was a mistake, a moment of weakness. It meant nothing. It was a masterful performance. A year ago, a week ago, it would have worked. But now, his words were meaningless, the empty promises of a bankrupt soul. Samantha laughed. A short, humorless sound. A moment of weakness? Richard, your entire life is a moment of weakness. You're a black hole, a man who consumes everything around him. But you will not consume me, and you will not consume our son. She walked past him, towards the grand staircase. I've packed your bags, she said over her shoulder. They're in the guest room. I suggest you find a good lawyer. You're going to need one. Jonathan Marks is already representing me. I believe you know of him. The mention of the legendary lawyer's name was the final blow. Richard sank onto one of his priceless antique chairs, his head in his hands, the picture of a fallen king. The millionaire who thought he had everything had just discovered he had nothing at all. Samantha didn't look back. She walked up the stairs, her head held high, a sense of profound, liberating peace settling over her. The gilded cage was no more. And for the first time in a very long time, she was free. The days that followed the homecoming were a blur of legal proceedings, media frenzies, and the quiet, steady work of dismantling a life. The story broke with the force of a tsunami. Tech titan Richard Hallberg accused of massive fraud, assets frozen amidst scandalous divorce. The headlines were sensational, the details salacious. Anonymous sources, all carefully orchestrated by Laura's team, leaked details of the affair, the lavish gifts, and the staggering scale of the financial deception. Hallberg Industries' stock cratered, and the board of directors, once Richard's loyal disciples, moved swiftly to oust him, desperate to distance themselves from the scandal. Richard, stripped of his wealth and power, was a ghost haunting the edges of his former life. He was forced to move into a modest rented apartment, his collection of supercars repossessed, his designer suits suddenly looking like ill-fitting costumes. The media hounded him, his face, once a symbol of success, now a portrait of public disgrace. Samantha, in contrast, became an unlikely and reluctant hero. She remained behind the gates of the Hollywood Hills mansion, which the court had granted her exclusive use of, creating a sanctuary for herself and Aaron. She refused all interview requests, communicating only through her lawyer, Jonathan Marks. Her silence was powerful, lending her an air of dignity and strength that contrasted sharply with Richard's frantic, desperate attempts to control the narrative. In a tearful televised interview, he painted himself as the victim, a man betrayed by a vindictive wife and a seductive employee. He claimed Samantha was mentally unstable, her actions driven by postpartum hormones. He tried to discredit Laura Vance, calling her a bitter ex-wife with a vendetta. "He's predictable," Laura had said during one of their strategy meetings in Samantha's sun-drenched kitchen. "When a narcissist loses control, he has only two moves: play the victim or burn everything to the ground. He's trying to do both." But his attempts were futile. The evidence Samantha had gathered was irrefutable. The SEC investigation was proceeding at lightning speed, and whispers of a federal indictment were growing louder. For Samantha, the victory was bittersweet. There was a grim satisfaction in seeing justice served, but there was no joy in witnessing the complete destruction of the man she had once loved. In the quiet moments, when the lawyers were gone and the house was still, a profound sadness would wash over her. She mourned not for the man Richard had become, but for the man she thought he was, for the future she had believed they would have. "Are you okay?" Aaron asked one evening, finding Samantha in the nursery, silently rocking in the chair they had picked out together. The room was painted a soft, calming blue, filled with the promise of a new life. "I will be," Samantha replied, managing a small smile. "It's just complicated. I thought my life was a fairy tale, and it turned out to be a cautionary one." "It's a comeback story," Aaron corrected her gently. "And the best part is just beginning." Aaron was right. Amidst the chaos of the legal battle, a new life was taking shape, not just for her baby, but for Samantha herself. Stripped of the identity of Richard Hallberg's wife, she was rediscovering the woman she had been before. She started painting again, setting up an easel in a sunlit corner of the house. Her first subject was the view from the window, the sprawling city that no longer seemed to bow at her feet, but instead looked like a landscape of endless possibility. She also began to take an active role in the legal strategy, not just as the provider of evidence, but as a decision-maker. She sat at the head of the table with Laura and Jonathan, her questions sharp, her insights invaluable. She was learning about finance, about corporate law, about the intricate dance of power and money. One of the most surprising developments was her relationship with Laura Vance. The two women, brought together by the shared experience of being betrayed by a Hallberg man, forged an unlikely bond. They discovered a mutual respect that blossomed into a genuine friendship. "You know," Laura said one afternoon over lunch, "I've spent my career cleaning up the messes of powerful men, but you're the first wife who didn't just want a settlement. You wanted to burn the whole corrupt system down and plant a garden in the ashes." Samantha laughed. "Is that what I'm doing?" "That's exactly what you're doing," Laura confirmed. "You've taken control of Hallberg Industries. The board is in chaos. They need a leader. The SEC is looking for a sign of stability. The company has good bones, despite Richard's corruption. It could be saved." "What are you suggesting?" Samantha asked, though she already knew. "I'm suggesting that the largest shareholder, which after the divorce settlement will be you, should take an active role. I'm suggesting that you should be the one to lead Hallberg Industries out of the darkness." The idea was audacious, terrifying, and utterly thrilling. Samantha, the art history major who had been relegated to the role of hostess and arm candy as the CEO of a multi-million-dollar tech company? It was insane. And yet, why not? She had a better understanding of the company's corrupt inner workings than anyone. She had the support of a brilliant financial mind in Laura, and she had a motivation that no other CEO could claim. She was fighting for her son's legacy, to transform a name tainted by scandal into one synonymous with integrity and resilience. "I'll think about it," Samantha said, a slow smile spreading across her face. The thought took root, a seed of ambition planted in the fertile ground of her newfound freedom. The world had expected her to crumble, to take her money, and disappear. But Samantha Hallberg was done doing what the world expected. She was ready to build something new from the ruins of her old life. The comeback story was just getting started. 2 months later, Samantha gave birth to a healthy baby boy. She named him Theodore, not after Richard's dynastic ambitions, but after the Greek word Theodoros, meaning gift from God. He was her gift, her anchor, her reason for the fight. Holding him in her arms for the first time, she felt a love so fierce and pure it eclipsed all the pain and betrayal of the past. This was her future. This tiny, perfect human being. The divorce was finalized in a quiet, unceremonious court proceeding. Richard, facing a mountain of federal charges, had no fight left in him. He agreed to all of Samantha's terms. The settlement was staggering. Samantha became the majority shareholder of Hallberg Industries, the legal owner of the Hollywood Hills mansion, and the recipient of a sum of money that ensured she and Theodore would be secure for life. The hidden assets, the villas and penthouses, were all seized by the government. Clara, the mistress at the center of the storm, had vanished. Faced with potential complicity charges, she had cooperated with the SEC in exchange for immunity and disappeared into obscurity, her 15 minutes of infamy over. Peter Vance, Richard's CFO and Laura's ex-husband, was not so lucky. He was indicted alongside Richard, his brilliant financial artistry leading him to a future behind bars. On the day the settlement was finalized, Samantha stood before the board of directors of Hallberg Industries. The room was filled with grim-faced men in expensive suits, the same men who had once patronized her at company galas. Today, they looked at her with a mixture of fear and respect. With Laura by her side as her chief advisor, Samantha laid out her vision. She wasn't there to liquidate the company or to continue Richard's ruthless practices. She was there to rebuild it. Hallberg Industries has been poisoned by a culture of greed and deceit, she said, her voice ringing with confidence. But its foundation is strong. Its employees are brilliant and innovative. We have an opportunity not just to save this company, but to transform it into a model of ethical leadership and corporate responsibility. She announced her first executive decision, a complete, transparent audit of the company's finances, to be led by Laura Vance. She outlined a new employee profit-sharing program and the creation of a charitable foundation funded by a percentage of the company's profits, dedicated to supporting women in tech. It was a radical vision, a complete departure from Richard's cutthroat ethos. There was skepticism in the room, but there was also a glimmer of hope. Samantha wasn't just another corporate raider. She was a phoenix, rising from the ashes of her husband's destruction, determined to build something better. The media, which had been so fascinated by the scandal, was now captivated by the story of her reinvention. From betrayed wife to visionary CEO, Samantha Hallberg's unlikely second act. She was no longer defined by Richard's betrayal, but by her own strength and vision. Life settled into a new rhythm. Her days were a blend of board meetings and baby feedings, of corporate strategy and lullabies. It was challenging, exhausting, but deeply fulfilling. She had her sister Erin, who had moved in permanently, acting as a co-parent and chief of staff. She had Laura, her friend and trusted confidant. She had a team of loyal employees who were inspired by her leadership. She was building a life and a company on her own terms. A year later, Hallberg Industries, under Samantha's leadership, was thriving. The stock had rebounded, and the company was gaining a reputation for its innovative products and its ethical, employee-centric culture. Samantha had proven her doubters wrong. She wasn't just a figurehead. She was a natural leader, with a sharp mind and an intuitive understanding of people. She had sold the cavernous Hollywood Hills mansion, finding its gilded rooms too full of ghosts. She bought a beautiful, light-filled home in a quieter, family-friendly neighborhood, a place where Theodore could run in the backyard and where the scent of money was replaced by the smell of jasmine and freshly cut grass. One afternoon, While she was at a local park, pushing Theodore on the swings, a man approached her. He was handsome, with kind eyes and a warm smile. He introduced himself as Ben, a pediatrician who worked at the local hospital. He didn't recognize her as the famous CEO Samantha Halberg. He just saw a mother playing with her son. They started talking, easily and naturally. They talked about their work, about their love for the city, about the simple joys of a sunny afternoon. For the first time since Richard, Samantha felt a spark of connection, a gentle hum of possibility. Their relationship grew slowly, organically. Ben was everything Richard was not. He was kind, patient, and genuinely interested in who she was, not what she represented. He was unimpressed by her wealth and unfazed by her past. He loved her for her strength, her intelligence, and the quiet resilience he saw in her eyes. He was wonderful with Theodore, treating him with a gentle affection that made Samantha's heart ache with a new kind of joy. Watching them build a sandcastle together, their heads bent in concentration, Samantha realized that she had finally found what she had been looking for all along. Not a grand, dramatic passion, but a quiet, steady love built on a foundation of trust and mutual respect. One evening, as they sat on her porch after putting Theodore to bed, Ben took her hand. "I read about you," he confessed quietly. "About everything you went through. I just want you to know how much I admire you." Samantha smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile. "That part of my life feels like a story about someone else now." "It is," he said, his gaze steady and sincere. "You're not that person anymore. You're the woman who is building an incredible company, the mother who is raising an amazing son, and the woman that I'm falling in love with." Tears welled in Samantha's eyes, but this time, they were tears of gratitude. She had survived the fire and had emerged not just unscathed, but stronger, brighter, and more herself than ever before. The final piece of her past was laid to rest on a crisp autumn day. A letter arrived from the Federal Correctional Institution where Richard was serving his 10-year sentence. Her first instinct was to throw it away, unopened, but curiosity and a sense that she needed this final closure made her pause. She sat in her sunlit kitchen, a cup of tea growing cold beside her, and read the letter. It was not the angry, manipulative diatribe she had expected. The man who wrote the letter was a shadow of the arrogant titan she had known. He was broken, humbled, and seemingly, finally, remorseful. "Samantha," it began, "I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness. What I did to you, to our family, is unforgivable. I spent my life building an empire of lies, and I lost the only things that ever truly mattered. I was a fool, blinded by my own ego. I hear things, even in here. I hear about what you've done with the company. You've made it something better, something I never could have. You've built it on a foundation of integrity. You were always the better part of me, and I was too stupid to see it. I don't expect a reply. I don't deserve one. I just wanted you to know that I see you. I finally see the incredible woman you are. I hope one day you can tell our son that his father made a terrible mistake, but that his mother was strong enough to build a better world from the wreckage. Be happy, Samantha. You've earned it. Yours, Richard." Samantha folded the letter, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. It wasn't a tear of sadness, but of release. The final ghost had been exorcised. She looked out the window at her beautiful, ordinary life. Theodore was chasing butterflies in the garden, his laughter echoing in the clear air. Ben was due home soon, and they were going to cook dinner together. Later, she had a proposal to review for a new, groundbreaking piece of technology her company was developing. Her life was full, not with the empty opulence of the past, but with the rich, meaningful texture of love, purpose, and connection. She thought of the password that had been the key to his downfall, the key to her freedom. Invictus Maneo. I remain unconquered. Richard had thought it applied to him, but he had been wrong. It was her mantra all along. She had faced betrayal, heartbreak, and public scandal, and she had not only survived, but she had triumphed. She had remained unconquered, and in doing so, she had found a life more valuable than any fortune, a love more real than any fairy tale, and a strength she never knew she had. She was, finally, and completely, free. In the end, this was never just a story about a millionaire and his mistress. It was about the incredible, unshakable power of a woman who refused to be a victim. Samantha Hallberg didn't just get revenge, she got redemption. She transformed her pain into purpose, turning the ruins of a life built on lies into the foundation of an empire built on integrity. She proved that the greatest strength isn't found in wealth or power, but in resilience, authenticity, and the courage to rewrite your own story. Her journey is a powerful reminder that even when your world shatters, you have the power to build a new one, stronger and more beautiful than before. What did you think of Samantha's incredible transformation? Let us know in the comments below. If you were inspired by her story of strength and resilience, don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear this message, and subscribe to our channel for more unforgettable stories. Have you ever trusted someone with your entire world, only to watch them shatter it in a single moment? For Sarah, 6 months pregnant and glowing with joy, the future seemed perfect. She had a loving husband, a beautiful home, and a baby on the way. But a single knock on the door was about to change everything. What she saw when she opened it wasn't just a betrayal. It was the end of her marriage, her trust, and the life she thought she knew. This is a story about how the deepest secrets can hide in plain sight, and how a woman's strength is forged in the fires of heartbreak. The scent of lemon and rosemary still clung to the air, a phantom of the roasted chicken Sarah had made for dinner. It was their favorite, a simple, comforting meal that felt like a hug from the inside out. At 6 months pregnant, every sensation was amplified. The gentle flutter of the baby kicking beneath her ribs, the warmth of the house settling around her, the deep, abiding love she felt for her husband, Ben. Their life, nestled in a quiet, tree-lined street in suburban Ohio, was a carefully constructed masterpiece of shared dreams and quiet contentment. Sarah traced the rim of her chamomile tea, her gaze drifting around the living room. Every object held a story. The slightly too large leather armchair was the first piece of furniture they'd bought together, a compromise between her love for modern lines and his penchant for oversized comfort. On the mantelpiece, a collection of photos chronicled their journey. A sun-drenched selfie from their honeymoon in Italy, a goofy picture with their golden retriever, Gus, and, most recently, a grainy ultrasound image, a tiny, miraculous profile that had already stolen their hearts. Ben was late. Not unusually so. His work as a senior architect at a prestigious downtown firm often demanded long hours. He was driven, ambitious, a man who built futures not just with blueprints and steel, but with a fierce dedication to the life they were creating. She admired his passion, even when it meant quiet dinners alone. Tonight, however, a strange restlessness had settled over her. The baby was particularly active, a tiny acrobat performing a full routine. And Gus whined softly by the door, his tail giving a half-hearted thump against the hardwood floor every few seconds. "He'll be home soon, boy," she murmured, reaching down to scratch behind his ears. Gus leaned into her touch, but his eyes remained fixed on the door. Theirs was a love story that had felt pre-written, a destiny she'd never questioned. They'd met in college, a classic tale of a jock falling for the artsy, introspective girl. Ben, with his easy smile and confident charm, had seen past her quiet exterior to the passionate heart within. He'd made her feel seen, cherished. He was her rock, the steady hand that grounded her when her own anxieties threatened to pull her under. He was the man who held her when she cried over a sad movie, the man who knew her coffee order by heart, the man who whispered promises of forever into her hair as they fell asleep at night. As the clock on the mantel ticked past 9, a sliver of unease pierced through her contentment. He hadn't called. He always called. It was one of their unspoken rules, a small courtesy that meant the world to her. She pulled her phone from her pocket, her thumb hovering over his contact. "Don't be the needy, pregnant wife," she chided herself. He was probably just caught up in a meeting, his phone silenced. She pushed herself up from the sofa, the weight of the baby making the simple movement a deliberate effort. A walk around the house might soothe her nerves. She wandered into the nursery, a room painted a soft, gender-neutral sage green. The crib, a beautiful oak piece Ben had spent an entire weekend assembling, stood against the far wall. Tiny, impossibly small clothes were neatly folded in the dresser. She ran her hand over a soft, yellow onesie embroidered with a little duckling. A wave of love, so fierce and protective it took her breath away, washed over her. This baby, their baby, was the culmination of everything they were, everything they hoped to be. It was then that she heard it, the low rumble of a car engine idling outside. But it wasn't the familiar, throaty purr of Ben's Audi. This was a deeper, less refined sound. Gus let out a sharp bark, his body tensing. Sarah's heart began to beat a little faster. She moved to the front window, peering through a gap in the curtains. A sleek, black sedan she didn't recognize was parked at their curb. The engine cut out and the headlights dimmed, plunging the street back into its sleepy, suburban quiet. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the passenger door opened. Ben! Relief washed over her, so potent it made her feel dizzy. He was home. He must have gotten a ride with a colleague. She was being silly, letting her pregnancy hormones get the best of her. She turned from the window, a smile already forming on her lips, ready to greet him with a playful scolding for not calling. But then she heard another car door open, the driver's side. A woman emerged. Even in the dim glow of the street lamp, Sarah could see she was tall and slender, with a cascade of dark hair that fell over her shoulders. She was wearing a trench coat, cinched tightly at the waist, and high heels that made a sharp, confident click on the pavement as she walked around the car to join Ben. Sarah froze, her hand still on the curtain. She watched as the woman reached up and straightened Ben's tie, her movements intimate, familiar. Ben's head was bowed, and he said something Sarah couldn't hear. The woman laughed, a sound that didn't reach the house, but was evident in the tilt of her head and the way her shoulders shook. Then, Ben leaned in and kissed her. It wasn't a friendly peck on the cheek. It was a deep, lingering kiss, the kind reserved for lovers, for partners, for the person you share your life with. It was the kind of kiss he hadn't given Sarah in months. The world tilted on its axis. The air in the room grew thick and heavy, impossible to breathe. The lemon and rosemary scent that had been so comforting moments before now turned cloying, nauseating. The baby gave a sudden, sharp kick, as if sensing its mother's distress. Sarah's mind struggled to process what her eyes were seeing. It was a scene from a movie, a nightmare. It couldn't be real. Not her Ben. Not their life. There had to be an explanation, a misunderstanding, a trick of the light. But there was no mistaking the way he placed his hand on the small of the woman's back, guiding her toward the house. There was no mistaking the proprietary way she leaned into him, and there was no mistaking the sound of their shared, low laughter as they approached the front door. A key scraped in the lock. Panic, cold and sharp, seized her. She couldn't be here. She couldn't face this. Not now. Not like this. Her instinct was to run, to hide, to disappear into the sage-green walls of the nursery and pretend this wasn't happening. But another instinct, a primal, protective one, rose up to meet the panic. This was her home, her life, her baby. She would not cower in the shadows while her world was being dismantled on her doorstep. Her feet, heavy as lead, carried her from the window, through the living room, and into the entryway. Her hand was on the doorknob, her knuckles white. She could hear their voices now, muffled, but clear through the wood. Just for a minute, the woman's voice, smooth as silk. I want to see it. I don't know, Jessica, Ben's voice, hesitant, but not resistant. Sarah's home. She's probably asleep, the woman, Jessica, purred. Come on, Ben. Don't be a coward. The key turned. The lock clicked. Sarah took a deep, shuddering breath, the last breath of the woman she used to be. And then she opened the door. The sight that greeted her would be seared into her memory forever. Ben, her Ben, stood on their welcome mat, his hand intertwined with the slender, manicured fingers of the beautiful woman beside him. Their faces, caught in the warm glow of the entryway light, were a mixture of surprise and, in Ben's case, a flicker of something that looked horrifyingly like guilt. But it was the woman's expression that struck Sarah the most. It wasn't shame or embarrassment. It was a cool, appraising confidence, a look of ownership. The silence that fell was absolute, a vacuum that sucked all the air from the space between them. The only sound was the frantic, terrified thumping of Sarah's own heart, a drumbeat marking the end of her marriage. The universe seemed to contract, shrinking to the confines of the brightly lit doorway. For a long, suspended moment, the three of them were frozen in a tableau of domestic horror. Ben's face, usually so open and readable to her, was a canvas of warring emotions, shock, fear, and a flash of pathetic, deer-in-the-headlights panic. His hand, which had been so confidently holding the other woman's, dropped away, as if her skin had suddenly turned to fire. The woman, Jessica, however, barely flinched. Her dark eyes, cool and assessing, swept over Sarah, taking in the swell of her belly, the soft, worn maternity sweater, the look of utter devastation that must have been written all over her face. There was no surprise in those eyes, only a flicker of something that looked like triumph. "Sarah," Ben stammered, his voice a hoarse whisper. He took a half-step forward, his hands raised in a placating gesture that was both instinctive and insulting. It's not what it looks like. The cliché was so absurd, so grotesquely inadequate for the scene playing out, that a bubble of hysterical laughter threatened to rise in Sarah's throat. She swallowed it down, the effort tasting like bile. Not what it looks like? Her voice was unnaturally calm, a thin sheet of ice over a raging sea of pain. What exactly do you think it looks like, Ben? She kept her eyes locked on his, refusing to give the other woman the satisfaction of her attention. She would not be the hysterical, weeping wife. She would not break. Not yet. The baby inside her gave another sharp kick, a tiny, insistent reminder of what was at stake. It was for this child, this innocent life, that she had to hold herself together. "She's a colleague," Ben said, the lie clumsy and transparent. "Jessica Reynolds. We were just finishing up a project. I was giving her a ride home." "A ride home," Sarah repeated, her voice dripping with a sarcasm she didn't know she possessed. "Does that normally involve a romantic stroll to my front door and a key to my house?" Jessica finally spoke, her voice as smooth and polished as her manicure. Ben, darling, perhaps we should go." She placed a hand on his arm, a gesture of ownership that was as blatant as a brand. Darling. The word was a poisoned dart, and it hit its mark. Sarah's composure finally cracked. A single hot tear escaped and traced a path down her cheek. "You will not call him that in my house." She finally turned her gaze to Jessica, and the full force of her fury and betrayal was unleashed. "And you," she said, her voice low and trembling with rage, "will get the hell off my property." Jessica's perfectly sculpted eyebrows rose in mock surprise. "Your property? That's funny. From what Ben's told me, this house is as much his as it is yours. Maybe more, considering who's been paying the mortgage." The cruelty of the remark was breathtaking. It was a calculated strike, designed to wound and diminish her. Sarah had quit her job as a graphic designer a year ago, a mutual decision they'd made to focus on starting a family. Ben had insisted, saying he wanted to provide for her, to let her focus on her health and the baby. Now, that loving gesture was being twisted into a weapon against her. The power imbalance in their relationship, something she had never truly felt before, was suddenly stark and terrifying. He held all the cards, the income, the career, and now, apparently, the secrets. "Get out!" Sarah repeated, her voice shaking but firm. Ben, finally seeming to grasp the severity of the situation, turned to Jessica. "You should go," he said, his voice low. "Now." Jessica gave him a look of pure disdain, a silent communication passing between them that spoke of shared secrets and broken promises. With a final, contemptuous glance at Sarah, she turned on her heel and walked back to her car, her heels clicking a sharp, defiant rhythm on the pavement. The moment the car door slammed shut, the fragile dam of Sarah's control broke. The silence in the entryway was deafening, filled with the unspoken words, the years of lies that had led them to this moment. Ben stood there, looking lost and broken, but Sarah could find no pity in her heart. All she could see was the ghost of his kiss with another woman, the casual intimacy of her hand on his tie. "How long?" she asked, the words tearing from her throat. "Sarah, please," he begged, stepping toward her. "Let's go inside. We can talk about this." "Don't touch me," she cried, recoiling as if he were a stranger. And in that moment, he was. The man she had loved, the man she had built a life with, had vanished. In his place was a liar, a cheat, a man who could look her in the eye day after day while living a double life. "How long, Ben?" she demanded again, her voice rising. He flinched, running a hand through his hair in a gesture of distress she now saw as pure performance. He couldn't even look at her. His eyes darted around the entryway, landing on the photo on the console table, the two of them smiling on their wedding day. He finally sighed, a sound of utter defeat. A little over a year. A year. The word hit her with the force of a physical blow. A year. 12 months. 365 days of lies, while they were trying for a baby. While she was going through fertility treatments, the hope and heartbreak of each month, a shared burden she thought they were carrying together. While she was finally, miraculously, pregnant with their child. He had been with another woman. The sheer scale of the deception was incomprehensible. It wasn't a one-night mistake, a moment of weakness. It was a calculated long-term betrayal. Every late night at the office, every business trip, every loving word, every tender touch was now tainted, a lie layered upon a lie. "A year," she whispered, the words tasting like ash. "You brought her to our home." It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact, a realization that the sanctity of their shared space had been violated long before tonight. "No, not like that," he said quickly. "She's never been inside, I swear. But you were going to bring her inside tonight, weren't you?" she shot back. If I had been asleep, as she so helpfully suggested, he had no answer. The guilt was written all over his face, a confession more damning than any words. The fight drained out of her, replaced by a profound, bone-deep weariness. The anger was still there, a hot, molten core in the pit of her stomach, but it was overshadowed by an overwhelming sense of loss. The future she had so carefully mapped out, the family dinners, the first steps, the Christmases and birthdays, had been erased. "You need to pack a bag," she said, her voice flat, devoid of emotion. He looked up, his eyes wide with disbelief. "What? Sarah, no. We can fix this. We can go to counseling. We can work through this. For the baby. The baby." She let out a short, bitter laugh. "You want to talk about the baby now? Did you think about the baby when you were with her? Did you think about us at all?" "Of course I did," he pleaded, his voice cracking. "I love you, Sarah. I never stopped loving you." "Love?" The word was a mockery. You don't destroy the person you love. You don't lie to them for a year. You don't bring your mistress to the home you share. That's not love, Ben. I don't know what it is, but it's not love. She turned and walked into the living room, her body moving on autopilot. She couldn't stand in the entryway a moment longer, in the space where her world had ended. She sank onto the sofa, her hands instinctively going to her belly, a protective shield around her child. Ben followed her, his desperation palpable. "Please don't do this. Don't throw away everything we have." "I'm not the one who threw it away," she said, looking up at him, her eyes clear and resolute. The tears had stopped. In their place was a cold, hard certainty. "You made your choice, Ben. You made it every day for the past year. Now I'm making mine." She watched him, the man she had loved more than life itself, and felt nothing but a vast, empty chasm. The power he had held over her, the power of her love and trust, was gone. He had shattered it, and in doing so, he had set her free. It was a terrifying, painful freedom. But it was freedom nonetheless. "I want you gone," she said, her voice steady. "Pack a bag and leave. We can talk about the rest later, through lawyers." The word lawyers hung in the air between them, a final, irrevocable severing of their bond. Ben stared at her, his face ashen. The fight seemed to drain out of him, replaced by a dawning realization that this was real. This was happening. He had broken them, and there was no going back. Without another word, he turned and walked up the stairs. Sarah sat perfectly still, listening to the sounds of him moving around in their bedroom. The opening and closing of drawers, the rustle of clothes. Each sound was a small death. The dismantling of their shared life. 10 minutes later, he came back down, a duffel bag in his hand. He paused at the bottom of the stairs, his eyes pleading with her one last time. But Sarah's face was a mask of stone. She would not give him the absolution he so desperately wanted. He walked to the door, his shoulders slumped in defeat. He opened it, then paused, his hand on the knob. "I am so sorry, Sarah," he whispered. She didn't answer. She just stared straight ahead, at the wall of photos that chronicled a life that no longer existed. The door closed behind him, the click of the latch echoing in the silent house. And Sarah, finally alone, wrapped her arms around her belly and began to sob. They were not the tears of a woman who had lost her husband. They were the tears of a woman who had lost herself. The drive was a blur. Sarah couldn't remember making the conscious decision to leave, only the visceral need to escape the four walls that had become a prison of memories. The sage-green nursery, once a sanctuary of hope, now felt like a monument to her naivety. The leather armchair, the photos on the mantel, the scent of rosemary and lemon, everything was tainted, poisoned by the truth. She had thrown a few essentials into an overnight bag, her movements jerky and robotic, and called her older sister, Rachel. "Can I come stay?" she'd asked, her voice a raw, broken thing. There was no hesitation, no probing questions, just a simple, immediate, "Of course, the spare room is always ready for you. Drive safe." Now, navigating the familiar highway that led from her quiet suburban street to the bustling city of Columbus, Sarah felt a profound sense of dislocation. The world outside her car continued on as normal. Headlights streamed past. Billboards advertised smiling families and dream vacations. The radio played a cheerful pop song. It was a surreal contrast to the wreckage of her inner world. She was a ghost, haunting her own life, invisible to the oblivious people around her. Rachel lived in a charming, slightly chaotic brick duplex in the heart of the short north, a vibrant arts district that was a world away from Sarah's manicured lawns and quiet cul-de-sacs. When Sarah pulled up to the curb, Rachel was already on the porch, a silhouette of unwavering support against the bright lights of a nearby gallery. The moment Sarah stepped out of the car, Rachel's arms were around her. She didn't say a word, just held her sister in a fierce, protective embrace. In that silent hug, Sarah finally allowed herself to feel the full weight of her grief. The strength she had summoned to confront Ben, to throw him out of her house, crumbled into dust. She clung to Rachel, her body racked with sobs, the raw, primal sounds of a heart breaking. "I know," Rachel murmured, her hand stroking Sarah's hair. "I know. Let it out. You're safe here." Inside, Rachel's apartment was a reflection of her personality. Warm, eclectic, and filled with life. Books overflowed from shelves, colorful paintings adorned the walls, and a half-finished pottery project sat on a table in the corner. It was a space that buzzed with creative energy, a stark contrast to the sterile perfection Sarah had so carefully curated in her own home. Rachel, a high school art teacher with a practical, no-nonsense approach to life, settled Sarah onto a plush, velvet couch, wrapped a handmade quilt around her shoulders, and pressed a steaming mug of tea into her hands. "Now," Rachel said, sitting opposite her, her expression a mixture of fierce loyalty and deep concern. "Tell me everything." And so, the story spilled out of her. The late night, the strange car, the woman, the kiss, the lies. She recounted the conversation, the hollow words, the year of deceit that had been hiding in plain sight. With each word, the reality of the situation became more concrete, more undeniable. Saying it out loud made it real. Rachel listened without interruption, her anger a palpable force in the room. When Sarah finally fell silent, her voice hoarse from crying, Rachel's eyes were blazing. "I'm going to kill him," she said, her voice a low growl. "I am going to find that spineless, cheating weasel, and I am going to dismantle him, piece by piece." Despite the pain, a small, watery smile touched Sarah's lips. It was so typically Rachel, all fire and fury on her behalf. "Get in line," Sarah whispered. "The house, the mortgage, he threw that in your face?" Rachel asked, her voice laced with disbelief. Sarah nodded, a fresh wave of humiliation washing over her. "He made me feel so small, Rach, like I was nothing more than a dependent, a freeloader in my own home. The whole time he was telling me he wanted to take care of me, to provide for us. He was building this narrative with her. That I was a burden. That's not a narrative, Sarah. That's a tactic," Rachel said, her teacher voice emerging. It's about control. He makes you financially dependent, isolates you from your career, and then uses that dependence to justify his own horrific behavior. It's classic psychological manipulation. He wanted to keep you in a box, and when you found out he had another box for his mistress, he tried to make you feel like you didn't even deserve the one you were in. Hearing it laid out so clinically, so logically, was both jarring and clarifying. Sarah had been swimming in a sea of emotional chaos, but Rachel had thrown her a lifeline of rational thought. The power imbalance wasn't just about money, it was about control. Ben hadn't just cheated, he had actively undermined her sense of self-worth to facilitate his betrayal. "What about the baby?" Rachel asked, her voice softening. "He tried to use the baby," Sarah said, her hand instinctively going to her stomach. "He said we should work through it for the baby, as if this innocent child should be the glue that holds together a broken, toxic marriage." "Good for you for not falling for that," Rachel said, her pride evident. "That's the oldest trick in the cheater's handbook. He doesn't care about the baby's well-being. He cares about his own. He wants to avoid the consequences, the public shame, the financial fallout. He wants to keep his comfortable life, and he's willing to use his own unborn child as a shield." The days that followed were a fog of grief and exhaustion. Sarah slept in Rachel's spare room, a cozy, sunlit space with a view of a small, overgrown garden. She spent hours just staring at the ceiling, her mind replaying the last year of her life, searching for signs she had missed. Had there been a shift in his touch? A new password on his phone? A sudden interest in working late? The clues were there, she realized now, a breadcrumb trail of deceit she had been too blind, too trusting to see. She was grappling with a profound, psychological conflict. Part of her, the part that had loved Ben for a decade, desperately wanted to believe there was a way back. It whispered to her in the dead of night, reminding her of his easy laugh, of the way he looked at her on their wedding day, of the shared history that was woven into the very fabric of her being. This part of her mourned the loss of the future she had so vividly imagined, a future that now lay in ruins. But another part of her, a newer, stronger part that was forged in the fire of his betrayal, knew that there was no going back. This part of her was fueled by a cold, hard anger. It was the part that recognized the depth of his manipulation, the calculated cruelty of his actions. It was the part that knew that the man she had married was a stranger, a carefully constructed facade hiding a hollow core. Rachel was her anchor in this storm. She didn't offer platitudes or easy answers. She simply sat with Sarah in her grief, making sure she ate, dragging her out for short walks in the crisp autumn air, and providing a constant, grounding presence. She was the one who gently suggested Sarah call a lawyer, just to know your options. She was the one who fielded the barrage of texts and voicemails from Ben, her responses a masterclass in protective fury. "He says he's sorry," Rachel reported one evening, her phone in her hand, her expression one of deep disgust. "He says he'll do anything to make it right. He wants to know where you are." "Don't tell him," Sarah said, her voice flat. "Wouldn't dream of it," Rachel said, typing a sharp reply. "I've informed him that all future communication will be through your legal counsel. Which reminds me, I made an appointment for you with a woman named Eleanor Vance. She's a shark, apparently. A very expensive, very effective shark." The thought of lawyers and divorce proceedings sent a wave of nausea through Sarah. It was so final, so clinical. But Rachel was right. She needed to protect herself. And more importantly, she needed to protect her baby. That night, as she lay in the unfamiliar bed, the sounds of the city a low hum outside her window, Sarah felt a subtle shift within her, The overwhelming grief was still there, a heavy cloak she couldn't yet shed. But beneath it, a tiny, fragile seed of something else was beginning to sprout. It was a flicker of anger, yes, but it was more than that. It was a sense of resolve. Ben had taken her past and poisoned it. He had stolen the future they were supposed to share. But he would not take this baby. He would not take her strength. She had lost her husband, her home, her sense of security. But she would not lose herself. In the quiet refuge of her sister's home, surrounded by unwavering love and support, Sarah began to understand that this was not just an ending. It was, in the most painful way imaginable, a new beginning. Eleanor Vance's office was the physical embodiment of quiet, expensive power. Located on the top floor of a sleek glass and steel skyscraper overlooking the Scioto Mile, it was a world of muted greys, polished chrome, and commanding views. The air itself seemed to hum with a low frequency of competence and authority. Eleanor, a woman in her late 50s with sharp, intelligent eyes, and a salt-and-pepper bob that was as precise as her legal arguments, did not waste time with pleasantries. "Rachel told me the broad strokes," she said, her voice calm and measured, as she gestured for Sarah to sit in a leather chair that was surprisingly comfortable. "I'm sorry for what you're going through. Now tell me everything, and don't leave out a single detail. The more I know, the better I can protect you and your child." For the second time in as many weeks, Sarah recounted the story of Ben's betrayal. But this time it was different, filtered through the lens of legal strategy, the emotional, personal tragedy, transformed into a series of facts, assets, and liabilities. The house, the cars, Ben's salary, his 401k, the joint savings account, they were no longer symbols of a shared life, but pieces on a chessboard. The affair itself, while emotionally devastating, has limited legal standing in a no-fault state like Ohio, Eleanor explained, making notes on a legal pad with a fountain pen. But his behavior, his financial control, his attempt to bring the other woman into the marital home, that speaks to character. And character can be very important when it comes to determining spousal and child support. She paused, her sharp gaze meeting Sarah's. "He's been trying to contact you." "Constantly," Sarah said, her voice weary. "Texts, emails, voicemails. He even sent flowers to Rachel's place. I don't know how he found the address." "He's trying to control the narrative," Eleanor said, nodding. "He wants to get to you before you have time to think, to build a case. He wants to play on your history, your emotions. He wants you to believe this is a simple mistake that can be fixed with apologies and promises. Do not engage. Let me be your shield." The word shield resonated with Sarah. It was exactly what she needed. She felt so exposed, so raw. The idea of having someone as formidable as Eleanor Vance standing between her and Ben was a profound relief. "I need you to do something for me," Eleanor continued, her tone shifting from empathetic counsel to strategic commander. "It's going to be difficult, but it's necessary. I need you to go back to the house." Sarah's heart plummeted. "I can't," she whispered. "I can't go back there." "You have to," Eleanor said, her voice firm but not unkind. "He's moved out, correct? He's staying with a friend?" "He said he was," Sarah confirmed. "Good. Then he has established a new primary residence. The house is, for now, yours. You need to go back and gather any and all financial documents you can find. Bank statements, credit card bills, tax returns, investment portfolios, pay stubs. Anything with his name on it. I suspect that a man who can maintain a secret life for over a year is also capable of maintaining secret finances." The thought was chilling. Sarah had never questioned their finances. Ben handled everything. He'd told her it was so she wouldn't have to worry, Another one of his grand, protective gestures that now seemed so sinister. He would show her a spreadsheet at the end of each month, a neat summary of their income and expenses. She had trusted him completely. The idea that he might have been hiding money, that his betrayal might have a financial dimension, was a new layer of violation. Rachel, ever the loyal soldier, insisted on going with her. They drove to the house in the middle of a weekday, a time when the quiet suburban street was mostly deserted. As Sarah put her key in the lock, the same lock Ben's key had scraped just weeks before, a wave of nausea washed over her. The house was cold and silent. It no longer felt like her home. It was a crime scene, and she was a detective searching for clues to a life she hadn't known she was living. "Okay," Rachel said, rubbing her hands together. "Operation Uncover the Weasel's secrets is a go. Where do we start?" "His office," Sarah said, her voice resolute. Ben's home office, like the rest of the house, was a study in curated perfection. A large mahogany desk, an ergonomic chair, shelves lined with architectural books and awards. It was the nerve center of his professional life, and Sarah suspected his secret one as well. She sat down in his chair, the leather still holding the faint scent of his cologne. It was a strangely intimate act, a violation of his private space, but she felt no guilt. He had forfeited that right. She turned on his desktop computer, her heart pounding. She had always known his password. It was the date of their anniversary. She typed it in, half expecting him to have changed it. He hadn't. The desktop sprang to life, revealing a neatly organized screen of folders and icons. For a moment, she didn't know where to look. It felt like an impossible task, searching for a needle in a digital haystack. "Check his email," Rachel suggested, peering over her shoulder. The sent folder, the trash. People are lazy. They rarely delete everything. Sarah opened his email client. The inbox was mostly work-related, a flurry of correspondence about blueprints, zoning laws, and client meetings. But then she saw it. A folder on the side panel, innocuously labeled Personal Projects. Her hand trembled as she clicked on it. It was a treasure trove of deceit. There were emails going back more than 2 years, not one. Emails between Ben and Jessica Reynolds. They were filled with inside jokes, pet names, and plans for secret rendezvous. There were confirmations for hotel rooms in cities where Ben was supposedly on business trips alone. There were links to restaurants she'd never heard of, theaters she'd never been to. But it was the financial discoveries that truly took her breath away. Tucked within the emails were PDF attachments of credit card statements for an account Sarah had never known existed. A card in his name, with a billing address for a P.O. box downtown. The statements were a roadmap of his affair. There were charges for expensive dinners, weekend getaways, and jewelry. A diamond necklace from Tiffany's, purchased just last Christmas, a time when Ben had told her they needed to be frugal because of the baby on the way. He had given her a thoughtful but modest gift, a first edition of her favorite book. "The son of a bitch," Rachel breathed, her voice a low, furious hiss. But there was more. Deeper in the folder, Sarah found a series of emails with a financial advisor. They discussed an investment account, also in Ben's name only. He had been siphoning money from his bonuses, funds that Sarah thought were going into their joint savings for the baby's future, and funneling them into this secret account. The balance was staggering, nearly $100,000. The hidden motive, the why behind his betrayal, was suddenly crystal clear, and it was uglier than simple infidelity. This wasn't just a man having an affair. This was a man systematically building a separate life, a life he was funding with their shared resources. He wasn't just cheating on her, he was stealing from her, from their child. Jessica wasn't just a mistress, she was a co-conspirator in a long-term plan. What was the end game? Was he planning on leaving her after the baby was born? Was he going to drain their joint accounts and disappear? The power imbalance she had felt was not just psychological. It was a calculated financial strategy. He had made her dependent so he could plunder their assets without scrutiny. The man she had trusted with her life, her future, her body, had been playing a long con. Sarah felt a strange sense of calm descend upon her. The pain was still there, a deep, throbbing ache. But it was now overlaid with a cold, clear fury. The grief-stricken wife was gone, replaced by a woman with a mission. She began to methodically download every email, every statement, every piece of evidence onto a flash drive. Each click of the mouse was a nail in the coffin of her old life, but it was also a brick in the foundation of her new one. She was no longer just a victim. She was a survivor, and she had the evidence to prove it. As they were about to leave, Sarah's eyes fell on a small, leather-bound journal on the corner of the desk, one she had given him years ago. He had never used it. On a whim, she opened it. The first few pages were blank, but then, tucked into the back pocket, was a single, folded piece of paper. It was a lease agreement for a downtown apartment in both their names, Ben Collins and Jessica Reynolds. It was dated 6 months ago. He hadn't just been planning a future with this woman. He had already started building it. He had a whole other home, a whole other life, running in parallel to the one he shared with Sarah. The house with the sage-green nursery was just a stage, and she had been the unwitting lead actress in a play she didn't know she was in. She folded the paper and put it in her purse, along with the flash drive. The unveiling was complete. The man she thought she knew was a complete fabrication, and now she had everything she needed to tear the whole facade down. The weeks following the discovery in Ben's office were a crucible. The cold, hard evidence on the flash drive acted as a strange sort of anchor, grounding Sarah in the reality of her situation. There was no more room for doubt, no lingering whispers of what if? The man she had married was a stranger, a masterful architect of deceit, and the life they had shared was a meticulously crafted illusion. The grief was still a constant companion, a dull ache behind her ribs, but it was no longer all-consuming. It was now mingled with a potent, clarifying anger that propelled her forward. She met with Eleanor Vance again, this time armed with a formidable arsenal of evidence. As Sarah laid out the credit card statements, the investment portfolio, and the lease agreement on the polished mahogany table, she saw a flicker of something akin to admiration in the lawyer's sharp eyes. "Well," Eleanor said, a slow, predatory smile spreading across her face, "this changes things. This isn't just infidelity anymore. This is a clear case of dissipation of marital assets. He has been actively defrauding you and your unborn child. We're no longer asking for a fair settlement, Sarah. We're going on the offensive." The shift in language, from defense to offense, was empowering. For the first time since she'd opened that door, Sarah felt a flicker of agency, a sense that she was no longer just reacting to the wreckage of her life, but actively taking control of its reconstruction. Eleanor's strategy was swift and decisive. She filed for divorce immediately, citing irreconcilable differences, and simultaneously filed a motion to freeze all of their assets, both joint and individual. This included the secret investment account. The legal papers were served to Ben at his prestigious downtown firm, an act of calculated precision designed to strip away his carefully maintained veneer of respectability. The fallout was immediate. Ben's barrage of pleading texts and emails stopped, replaced by a single furious phone call to Eleanor, which she recounted to Sarah with grim satisfaction. He had been blindsided, enraged that his private dealings had been exposed. He had accused Sarah of being vindictive, of trying to ruin him. "He's not angry that he got caught," Eleanor had told her, her voice dry. "He's angry that he lost control. That's what this has always been about for him. Control. And we just took it away from him." While the legal battle raged in the background, Sarah focused on the monumental task of building a new life. Rachel's spare room, once a temporary refuge, began to feel more like a command center. Armed with her laptop and a growing sense of determination, Sarah started to reclaim the parts of herself she had let go of during her marriage. Her first step was to resurrect her career. She had been a talented graphic designer with a portfolio of freelance work she had been proud of. She spent hours updating her website, crafting a new resume, and reaching out to old contacts. It was daunting at first. The industry had changed, and her confidence was shaky. But with each email she sent, with each positive response she received, a piece of the old Sarah, the ambitious, creative woman she had been before Ben, began to re-emerge. She landed a small freelance project, designing a logo for a local bakery. The pay was modest, but the feeling of earning her own money, of creating something tangible and beautiful, was priceless. It was a declaration of independence, a small but significant step toward financial and emotional self-sufficiency. Her focus also shifted to her pregnancy. She found a new OB-GYN in the city, a warm, reassuring woman who treated her not as a high-risk case, but as a strong, capable single mother-to-be. She signed up for a prenatal yoga class where she met other expectant mothers. In their shared stories of swollen ankles, strange cravings, and hopes for the future, she found a sense of community she hadn't realized she was missing. These women weren't interested in the brand of her stroller or the size of her house. They were interested in her journey. They talked about birth plans and breastfeeding, about navigating maternity leave and childcare. For the first time, Sarah began to envision a future for her and her baby that wasn't defined by loss, but by possibility. A future that was entirely her own. One afternoon, as she was sitting in a sunny cafe, sketching out logo ideas for the bakery, her phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "I think we should talk. I know a place that's quiet." Jessica. Sarah's blood ran cold. Her first instinct was to delete the message, to block the number, to follow Eleanor's advice and refuse all contact. But a different, more powerful impulse took hold. She was tired of hiding. She was tired of being the victim. She had questions, and this woman, the architect of her pain, had the answers. She agreed to meet, choosing the location herself, a busy, public park in the middle of the day. She would not give Jessica the advantage of a private, intimate setting. Jessica was already there, sitting on a bench overlooking a duck pond. She looked different in the harsh light of day, smaller, less formidable than the glamorous phantom who had haunted Sarah's nightmares. She was still beautiful, but up close, Sarah could see the faint lines of stress around her eyes, the slight tremor in her manicured hands. "Thank you for coming," Jessica said, her voice lacking the smooth confidence Sarah remembered. "I'm not here for you," Sarah said, her voice steady. She remained standing, a subtle assertion of power. "I'm here for me. I want to know why," Jessica sighed, her gaze fixed on the ducks gliding across the water. "I could tell you I fell in love with him. I could tell you he was unhappy, that your marriage was already over. He told me it was. He said you were distant, cold, that you'd changed. The familiar narrative, the one Ben had tried to sell her, had no power over her anymore. He was lying to you, just like he was lying to me," Sarah said, her voice flat. Jessica gave a short, bitter laugh. "I'm starting to realize that. He told me he was going to leave you after the baby was born. He said it would be cleaner that way. He promised me we would have the house, a life together. He was building a nest egg for us, for our future. Our future, Sarah repeated, the words tasting like poison. He was stealing from his own child's future to build one with you. For the first time, Jessica looked directly at Sarah, and in her eyes, Sarah saw not malice, but a reflection of her own disillusionment. "He played us, didn't he?" Jessica said, her voice barely a whisper. "He told each of us exactly what we wanted to hear. He made you the dependent, stay-at-home wife so he could control the finances. He made me the exciting, successful career woman who understood his ambition. We were just two sides of the same coin for him. Two roles he needed someone to play. The revelation was staggering. It wasn't a simple case of a man choosing one woman over another. Ben hadn't loved either of them. He had loved the power, the control, the thrill of maintaining two separate, carefully curated lives. He was a narcissist, a man so hollow at his core that he needed constant validation from multiple sources. When your lawyer served him the papers at his office, they put him on leave, Jessica said, her voice cracking. The partners are investigating his finances, the apartment we leased. He used a fraudulent credit report. He's ruined, and he's trying to blame me, to blame you. He's trying to say we conspired against him. A strange, unexpected feeling washed over Sarah. It wasn't pity, but it wasn't satisfaction either. It was a sense of profound clarity. She and Jessica were not rivals. They were both victims of the same man's pathological selfishness. "He won't win," Sarah said, and the words were a promise to herself as much as a statement to Jessica. "He's not going to ruin my life, and he's not going to ruin my babies." She turned to leave. The conversation finished. She had gotten what she came for. Not an apology, not an explanation, but the final, irrefutable truth. "Sarah!" Jessica called out. She had stood up, her face pale. "For what it's worth, I am truly sorry. For my part in all of this, and for your baby." Sarah paused, her back still to the other woman. She thought of the long road ahead, the legal battles, the challenges of single motherhood. But for the first time, she felt a genuine sense of peace. The anger had burned itself out, leaving behind a clean, quiet strength. She was rising from the ashes of her old life, not as a victim, but as the sole architect of her new one. She didn't reply. She just kept walking, her head held high, her hand resting on the gentle curve of her belly, a silent promise to the new life that was growing within her. The future was uncertain, but it was hers. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like enough. The calm that had settled over Sarah after her meeting with Jessica was short-lived. It was the quiet eye of the storm, a brief respite before the full fury of the gauntlet Ben intended to throw down was unleashed. His initial shock and rage had morphed into a calculated, vicious legal strategy. Stripped of his ability to manipulate her emotionally, he now wielded the only weapon he had left: money and the legal system. He hired a notoriously aggressive lawyer, a man whose reputation for scorched-earth tactics was whispered with a mixture of fear and awe in legal circles. The first salvo was a countersuit, a document filled with such outrageous lies and distortions that it felt like a piece of fiction. He accused Sarah of being emotionally unstable, of having an affair herself, of being an unfit mother. He claimed the money in his secret account was a family inheritance, and that she was a gold digger trying to extort him. He even contested the freeze on his assets, claiming it was preventing him from paying his own living expenses, despite the six-figure salary he still drew while on leave. "It's a classic narcissist's defense," Eleanor Vance explained, her voice a low, steady hum over the phone. She was completely unfazed. Attack, deny, and reverse, victim and offender. He's not trying to win on the merits of the case. He's trying to wear you down. He wants to exhaust you emotionally and financially until you give up and accept a lowball settlement. We won't let that happen. But knowing the strategy and living through it were two very different things. The legal battle became a war of attrition. There were depositions, endless requests for documents, and motions designed to delay and harass. Each legal document that arrived was a fresh assault, a new attempt to rewrite their history and paint her as the villain. The stress began to take a physical toll. Sarah suffered from sleepless nights, her mind racing with anxieties. The baby, as if sensing her turmoil, was often restless, its frantic movements a mirror of her own churning emotions. The biggest challenge came during a scheduled mediation session. Eleanor had warned her that it would be difficult, but Sarah was unprepared for the visceral shock of seeing Ben in person for the first time in months. He sat across the long, polished conference table, looking thinner, his face drawn and pale. But the air of arrogant confidence was gone, replaced by a cold, reptilian stillness. He refused to make eye contact, directing all his comments to his lawyer. His lawyer, a slick, silver-haired man named Marcus Thorne, opened with an offer so insulting it was laughable. They offered Sarah a fraction of the marital assets, no spousal support, and a child support payment that wouldn't even cover the cost of diapers. "My client is prepared to offer this out of the goodness of his heart," Thorne said, his voice smooth as oil, despite Miss Collins's erratic behavior and questionable moral character. "We believe a lengthy court battle would be detrimental to the child, and we are confident that a judge would see the merits of our case regarding Ms. Collins's fitness as a parent." The threat was clear. "Take this pittance, or we will drag your name through the mud and try to take your child." Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. The air in the room grew thick and heavy. She looked at Ben, at the man who had once promised to love and protect her, who was now threatening to destroy her, and felt a surge of white, hot fury. "No," she said, her voice shaking but clear. Eleanor placed a calming hand on her arm. "My client rejects your offer," she said, her tone icy. She then systematically dismantled their arguments, presenting the evidence of Ben's financial fraud, the lease for his secret apartment, the credit card statements detailing his lavish spending on his mistress. "Your client is the one whose moral character is in question, Mr. Thorne, and we have the receipts to prove it. We are not here to negotiate. We are here to inform you of what we will be presenting in court. We are confident that a judge will not only award my client her rightful share of the marital assets, but will also take a very dim view of your client's attempts to hide money from his pregnant wife." The mediation ended in a stalemate, but Sarah left with a renewed sense of resolve. Ben's threats had been designed to intimidate her, to make her feel small and powerless, but they had the opposite effect. They had ignited a fire within her, a fierce, protective instinct that she hadn't known she possessed. He was not just attacking her anymore, he was attacking her child, and she would not let him win. The financial strain of the legal battle was immense. Eleanor's fees were substantial, and Sarah's freelance work, while growing, was not enough to cover the mounting bills. She had to dip into her own small savings, the money she had carefully set aside before her marriage. It was a humbling, terrifying experience. There were days when she would stand in the grocery store, calculating the cost of every item, a stark contrast to the thoughtless spending of her previous life. One evening, overwhelmed by stress and exhaustion, she felt a sharp, cramping pain in her lower abdomen. Panic seized her. She called her doctor, who advised her to go to the hospital immediately. Rachel, her face a mask of concern, drove her, breaking every speed limit. Lying in the sterile, brightly lit hospital room, hooked up to a fetal monitor, Sarah felt a terror unlike anything she had ever known. The legal battles, the financial worries, the heartbreak, it all faded into insignificance. All that mattered was the tiny, precious life inside her. The doctor, a kind, grey-haired man with a calming bedside manner, came in after what felt like an eternity. "The baby is fine," he said, his voice gentle. "Your blood pressure is a little high, and you're showing signs of preterm labor, likely brought on by stress. We've given you a steroid shot to help the baby's lungs develop, just in case. But for now, the contractions have stopped. The best thing you can do for this baby is to rest and avoid stress as much as possible." The words hit her with the force of a physical blow. Her stress, her fight with Ben, was physically endangering her child. She had been so focused on winning the war, she hadn't realized the toll it was taking on the very person she was fighting for. Lying in the quiet darkness of the hospital room that night, listening to the steady, rhythmic beat of her baby's heart on the monitor, Sarah had an epiphany. Winning wasn't about destroying Ben in court. It wasn't about getting every last penny she was owed. Winning was about bringing her child into the world, healthy and safe. Winning was about creating a peaceful, loving home, free from the toxicity and conflict of the past. The next day, she called Eleanor. "I want to settle," she said, her voice firm. "Sarah, we're so close," Eleanor protested. "We have him on the ropes." "I know," Sarah said. "But it's not worth it. The stress is putting the baby at risk. No amount of money is worth that. Let's make them a fair offer. One that gives me what I need to start over, to provide for my child. But I'm done fighting. I'm choosing my baby. I'm choosing peace." It was the hardest decision she had ever had to make. It felt like letting him win. But as she said the words, a profound sense of relief washed over her. She was not surrendering. She was redefining victory. Eleanor, after a long pause, finally agreed. "I understand," she said, her voice filled with a newfound respect. "You're making a mother's choice. Let's draft an offer." They offered to split the known marital assets, including the house, down the middle. They would drop the motion regarding the dissipation of assets in exchange for a lump sum spousal support payment and a generous, non-negotiable child support agreement. It was less than she could have gotten in court, but it was enough. It was a clean break. Ben, likely advised by his lawyer that a jury would be deeply unsympathetic to his case, accepted the offer. The war was over. Sarah walked out of the lawyer's office into the bright afternoon sun, feeling lighter than she had in months. She had walked through the gauntlet and emerged, not unscathed, but whole. She had faced the worst of her fears: financial ruin, public humiliation, the threat of losing her child, and she had survived. She had learned to fight, but more importantly, she had learned when to stop fighting. She placed a hand on her belly, where the baby was now resting peacefully. "It's just you and me now, little one," she whispered. "And we're going to be okay." The final months of Sarah's pregnancy were a period of quiet, deliberate reconstruction. With the legal battle behind her, a weight had been lifted, not just from her mind, but from her very soul. The air seemed easier to breathe, the colors of the world more vibrant. The settlement, while not the windfall Eleanor had initially aimed for, was more than enough. It provided security, a foundation upon which she could build her new life. Her first act of redemption was to reclaim her home. Walking back into the house she had once shared with Ben was a strange experience. It was no longer a crime scene or a battleground, but simply a space, a collection of rooms waiting to be filled with new memories. With Rachel's help, she began the process of purging the past. They packed away the photos of her and Ben, the wedding gifts, the remnants of a life that was no longer hers. They painted over the neutral, sophisticated greys with warm, cheerful colors. The large leather armchair, once a symbol of their compromised tastes, was sold online, replaced by a comfortable, stylish rocking chair, perfect for nursing a newborn. The most significant transformation took place in Ben's old office. Sarah turned it into her own design studio. The mahogany desk was replaced with a large white drafting table. The shelves once lined with his architectural awards now held her art books, pots of colorful pens, and inspiration boards filled with fabric swatches and beautiful typography. It was a space that was entirely hers, a testament to her talent and her newfound independence. Her freelance business was thriving, her reputation for clean, elegant design growing by word of mouth. She was not just surviving, she was flourishing. She also focused on redeeming her definition of family. Her old vision, the nuclear family with the white picket fence, had been shattered. In its place, she was building something new, something more resilient. Her bond with Rachel, always strong, had deepened into an unbreakable alliance. Her sister was her rock, her confidant, her co-conspirator in all things baby-related. Her parents, who had been horrified by Ben's betrayal, wrapped her in a cocoon of unconditional love and support, respecting her decisions and celebrating her strength. Her circle of friends from her prenatal yoga class became her village, a community of women navigating the beautiful, chaotic journey of motherhood together. They threw her a baby shower in the backyard of her reclaimed home. It was a sun-drenched afternoon, filled with laughter, joy, and an overwhelming sense of female solidarity. As she sat in her new rocking chair, surrounded by women who loved and supported her, opening gifts of tiny socks and soft blankets, she felt a profound sense of gratitude. Her family was not broken. It had simply been redefined. 2 weeks before her due date, Sarah went into labor. It was a long and arduous process, a testament to the strength and endurance she had cultivated over the past 9 months. Rachel was by her side the entire time, a fierce and loving coach, holding her hand, wiping her brow, and whispering words of encouragement. And then, in the quiet, early hours of a new day, her son was born. They placed him on her chest, a tiny, perfect creature with a tuft of dark hair and his mother's wide, curious eyes. He was warm and solid, his small body fitting perfectly in the curve of her arms. As she looked at his face, a wave of love so powerful, so all-encompassing, washed over her, erasing the last vestiges of pain and bitterness from her heart. This was what it had all been for. This was the redemption. She named him Noah. It meant rest and comfort, everything she hoped to give him, everything he had already given her. In the days that followed, Sarah's world shrank to the size of her small, perfect son. The sleepless nights, the endless cycle of feeding and changing, the overwhelming responsibility. It was all consuming, but it was a beautiful, sacred exhaustion. She would spend hours just watching him sleep, his tiny chest rising and falling, his small hand wrapped around her finger. He was a part of her, but he was also his own person, a new beginning, a clean slate. One afternoon, about a week after Noah was born, a package arrived. It was a small, flat box with no return address. Hesitantly, she opened it. Inside, nestled on a bed of velvet, was a simple, elegant silver locket. There was a note, written in a familiar, precise handwriting. Sarah, There are no words to express the depth of my regret. I know that sorry is a meaningless word after what I did. I don't expect your forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I have started therapy to understand the man I became, the man who could cause such pain to the person he loved most in the world. I have a long way to go. I heard about the baby, a son. I hope one day he will know that his father's failings are not his own. I have set up a trust fund for him, which my lawyer will be in contact with yours about. It's the least I can do. It's not an attempt to buy my way back into your lives, but a genuine desire to provide for my son. I will not contact you again. I will respect your peace. I wish you nothing but happiness. Ben, Sarah read the note, her heart a strange mixture of emotions. The anger was gone, replaced by a quiet, detached sadness for the man he had been, and the man he was trying to become. His redemption was his own journey, separate from hers. She hoped, for his sake, that he would find it. But his path was no longer her concern. She looked at the locket. It was beautiful, but it was a relic from a past she had moved on from. She put it away in a box with the other remnants of her old life. She didn't need his gifts or his apologies. She had everything she needed right here in her arms. Later that evening, she sat in the rocking chair in Noah's nursery, the room bathed in the soft glow of a moonbeam. The sage-green walls, once a symbol of a shared, broken dream, now felt peaceful and serene. She held her son close, his warm breath on her neck, and hummed a soft lullaby. She thought about the woman she had been 9 months ago, the woman who had opened a door and watched her world crumble. That woman was gone. In her place was a mother, a survivor, a warrior. She had faced the ultimate betrayal and had not only survived, but had emerged stronger, more compassionate, and more fiercely alive than ever before. Her marriage had ended, but her life had not. Her story was not one of tragedy. It was a story of redemption. Not his, but hers. She had redeemed her life from the ashes of his lies, building a future filled with love, strength, and the quiet, profound joy of a mother holding her child. As Noah drifted off to sleep, a small, contented smile on his lips, Sarah knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her bones, that this was not an ending. This was just the beginning. Sarah's journey from devastating heartbreak to powerful redemption is a testament to the incredible resilience of the human spirit. Her story reminds us that even when our worlds are shattered, we have the strength within us to rebuild, to redefine our futures, and to find happiness on our own terms. It's a story of a mother's fierce love, a woman's unwavering courage, and the discovery that sometimes the end of one chapter is simply the beginning of a much better one. If Sarah's story moved you, please give this video a like and share it with someone who might need to hear a message of hope and strength. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell for more powerful stories that explore the complexities of life and love. Thank you for watching.